If there was one word I would use to describe in our times today, it would be the word uncertain. Uncertainty in our economy, uncertainty in our health and the health of those we love, uncertainty in our jobs and our schools. Everywhere we turn, there's uncertainty. And with all this uncertainty, it threatens to bleed into our faith in God.
On this morning's Monday Mindset, we are going to reflect on God as our great deliverer. All throughout history, God has always delivered his people. And we're going to take a look at how knowing who God is gives us the confidence that we desperately need to walk faithfully with Jesus. Stay tuned. What's up, everyone? In case you didn't already know, my name is Daniel, and this is my beautiful wife, Nadia. You know another thing that's uncertain? Spring weather in Colorado. And as you can tell, it's snowing, and it's in April. I want to start us off with a question. Think about the person that you trust the most in this world. And you can't say your wife, because that's a given, that's a cheating answer. But think about, your best friend. And say your best friend showed up and he or she asked you for your car keys. For me, I can think of some of my best friends, like, Nick Reagan maybe. If Nick walked into my house and said, "Hey, Daniel, let me have your keys," I wouldn't actually think much of it. I would just give Nick my keys. I wouldn't really have to worry about what he's going to do, because I've known Nick long enough and I believe in who he is enough to trust him with my car keys. Even if he didn't come back right away, even if it took him half an hour, to come back, I wouldn't feel it necessary to be concerned. Because why? Because I trust Nick. And God is very similar. If we can entrust something like our car keys or our house keys or a credit card to our best friends, how much more can we trust God knowing who he is? And now he is a God who delivers his people. I want to go through a couple examples where God actually delivers his people. And the first one I want to call our attention to is in Genesis chapter 22. It's where Abraham and Isaac are delivered by God because God provides a ram in the thicket just in the nick of time. Genesis 22, verses 9 through 13. When they reached the place that God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife and to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out for him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up. There in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. God delivered again. And another example is in Daniel chapter 3, where he delivers Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And as you know how the story goes, Nebuchadnezzar throws Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the furnace. And here's their attitude and their confidence in God, knowing that he would deliver them. In Daniel chapter 3, verses 16 and 17, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into a blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." And when they finally came out of the fire, in verse 26 it says, "So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, and governors and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them." He delivers Israel from Egypt and then sustains them with manna from heaven. He delivers Gideon, Elijah, and so many other prophets. The stories in the Old Testament are countless. And then think about the ministry of Jesus. He delivers people on a much more personal level. He delivers the woman at the well and gives her a new purpose. He delivers Matthew, the tax collector. He delivers the blind, the deaf, and the mute. And another amazing story, he delivers the sinful woman who washes Jesus' feet with her hair. And I'm going to go ahead and let Nadia share a little bit more about that story.
I would like to start reading Luke 7, starting in verse 36. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman at that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair and kissed them and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisees who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner." Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more?" Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven." "Yes, you have judged correctly," Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this even forgives sins?" Jesus said to this woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Jesus delivers this woman by forgiving her sins. She was completely honest and vulnerable. She was desperate and persistent. She was completely humble. By her example, I had to recognize my sin in needing Jesus' help. Oftentimes, I have felt ashamed and deeply insecure of who I was. Seeing how Jesus treats this woman helps me to see that He is a loving God. He sees me for who I am. He has never failed to love me. This gives me the confidence that He is the truth. His love is unconditional. Everything I lack, He supplies. Jesus gives me the certainty of salvation, and He will deliver me.
Okay, so let's recap. The overwhelming narrative of the Bible is that God is faithful, God provides, and that God always delivers. God speaking is His doing. He always does what He says He will do. So what does that mean for us? Knowing that God is going to deliver us no matter how crazy things in the world get is amazing. So what do we do in the meantime? Well, we imitate the people in the Scriptures. We obey God the way Abraham obeyed God in his challenge to sacrifice Isaac. We refuse to bow down to different idols in this world the way Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. And we imitate the attributes of the sinful woman in that she was completely vulnerable, and that she was completely humble, and that she was completely persistent. We imitate the people in the Scriptures who loved God and obeyed His purposes. So if you've made it this far in the video, thank you for watching, but you're not off the hook just yet. I want you to think about who can you encourage with the message of trusting God? What are areas in your life that you have a hard time trusting in God? Let's finish by reading Daniel chapter 11, verse 32. Now, the first half of this verse is actually talking about a pretty evil leader at the time. But the second half applies to us, people who know God. It says, "He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant, but the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action." Let us be a people that is resolved to take action, even in the midst of great uncertainty. God is a deliverer, and we are his people. Have a great week, everyone.